Do we need to completely tear down our relationship to rebuild it?
Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin. All right, you guys, welcome back to the Therapy Brothers podcast. I am running solo today, so Tyler is off. He's probably on top of a mountain right now looking at a sunrise in complete zen, just doing his thing like he does most days. So realistically, he's just a good man. He's a good father. He's out, I think, hunting with his daughter, spending some one-on-one time and just doing things he loves. So I'm happy that he's doing that, taking some self-care, and I'm happy to be here today on my own. And luckily, I'm not on my own completely. I have a great guest today. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here this morning.
If you could just give a little bit of context to what's going on, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'll try to give a brief version. A lot of history, of course. So I'm currently about 7 months, or a little, actually about 7.5 months into a separation from my wife. We've been married for 19 years, been together for 20. Have 5 wonderful kids, and really, as far as like relational issues, my wife and I just get along amazing. She really is like my best friend, and I think she would say the same about me. But obviously, I'm here on this podcast, so everything's not perfect and wonderful. So I, have addiction issues that were rooted in a lot of shame, self-loathing, never feeling like I was enough. And a lot of that was due to kind of the environment that I grew up in, not necessarily directly related to my parents, but maybe secondarily. My parents are wonderful, awesome people. But growing up in kind of like the culture of the time in the religion, and with a mom who was kind of a tough love mom, raising 5 brothers. She had to be a tough love mom, so that we didn't burn the house to the ground. And then a dad who worked a lot, and so he was gone a lot of the time. Now, a lot of times we were out there working with him, and he was a good father figure. But yeah, you talk about father wounds, and there's definitely some of those there. So anyway, that first started with an early exposure to some pornography from a neighbor kid when I was about 11, and then it was kind of a slow progression through my teenage years. In college, that's when internet kind of became more prevalent, and had more readily exposure to pornography. And I think naively, like a lot of people, I figured that once I got married, that would just be fixed, right? Well, I got married to this wonderful gal, and that wasn't fixed. And they talked about this.
And you, Jesse, you didn't tell her about anything?
I didn't. Not prior, no.
Okay.
And then after about a year of marriage, I had abstained for about a year, and then had another incident, and that's when I told her about that.
Gotcha.
And that was hard for her to hear, of course, but she's pretty understanding of it at that time. And then as life kind of progressed and went on, and the pressures kind of continued to mount of school and work and working through a career, and just the progressive nature of the disease and my poor coping mechanisms, it eventually escalated to I think at about the 10-year point of our marriage is when it escalated to actual affairs. And there were multiple discoveries where my wife found out about those affairs, and she gave me way more second chances than I ever deserved. And ultimately, just about 7.5 months ago was the final discovery. I did back in 2021, I did a 2-week intensive out in Colorado, which was very life-changing and gave me a lot of good skills to get me onto a good road of recovery. And I had initially done well with recovery after that, had about 1.5 years sobriety, but it was kind of like white knuckling. I wasn't really thriving in recovery at that time, and hadn't really found good group options as far as like support groups. I had started working with the CSAT, but at that time, our insurance didn't cover it, and we were kind of strapped with cash. We had just barely opened up a new business venture, and so I was self-employed, and so I saw a CSAT for about 3 months or so, and then kind of let that fall by the wayside. And the support group of brothers that I had kind of developed with that inpatient intensive, that kind of disintegrated after about 1 year or so as well, because some of the dynamics of that group kind of interposed itself, and kind of came crashing down. So I didn't really find a safe place to land after that, and ended up having a small relapse, which I guess I shouldn't minimize it. I had a relapse with pornography, which I discussed with my wife, and that did not go over well. Understandingly so. She was very hurt by it, very upset. We had made a big sacrifice to pay for me to go to this program, and financially, and so yeah, that was very hard for her to hear, and so I kind of became a coward from there on out, as far as like divulging anything to her. Really didn't do a good job at divulging things to anyone else. And so I kind of just went back into that space of like, well, I can figure this out on my own. I can take care of this, I can fix it. And of course, that's not what happens. So eventually ended up back into a space of having 2 other affairs, which is what she discovered about 7.5 months ago. So since that discovery, I've had, I really think that she had like saved my life in no uncertain terms by forcing the separation and kicking me out, because I've had a real awakening as far as recovery goes. And as far as recovery goes, I've been doing very well. Our insurance now has great mental health benefits, and I've been working with 2 different CSATs. I do 1 to 3 Zoom support meetings per day. So I'm doing a lot of support work. I've got guys from those meetings that I'm usually checking in with a couple times a day, doing readings. So I'm working recovery really well, and I feel like I'm really thriving in it because I love what I'm doing now. It's not white knuckling. So recovery wise, I've been sober all this time, ever since the separation. But yeah, this is the question I have is, moving forward, is there still some hope there in the relationship? And we still get along well. We're still very amicable. But I'm wondering, is this tear down really going to help,
Jesse, tell me the arrangement you have now with her. So you're separated.
So
Yeah.
So I am we're living separately. She's at the family home with the kids, and then I live just a few miles away, so I'm still pretty close. Um,
Okay.
and then communication wise, we still communicate quite a bit. Um, she'll go back and forth. Like some days she'll say, "Hey, today I need you to talk to me just about the kids, nothing else." And so I, like to give her that space. Um, so she's needed space, so she hasn't had any interest at all in doing any couples work um, this whole time. Uh, that's
Okay.
she's been very adamant that whole time about no couples work being done at all.
And are you getting like guidance from a therapist on that? Or, like
Um,
suggesting that and suggesting the space?
well, we have a therapist that she works mainly with. She and I both kind of worked with this therapist off and on, and the therapist kind of would like us to do couples work, but is also wanting to respect her boundaries.
Okay.
Um, and initially, I think that she would have been open to it, but she went to a betrayal retreat and came back from that betrayal retreat. Initially, she'd said, I want like 3 months separation in house, and we'll see where we're at." And then she came back from that retreat, and that's when she said, "I want like a minimal 1 year separation, and you need to move out, and I don't want to do any couples work. Like, you work on your stuff, I'm going to work on my stuff."
Mhm.
And that's where the idea of like the tear down came about. Like, I need to completely tear us down to see if there's anything worth rebuilding.
Yeah. Um, okay. And so for you, you're respecting that, but there's a part of you that it's uncomfortable, and you're wondering if that's what's best. Is that?
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
kind of feels like, okay, if I move out and if we don't like, really talk about anything other than like the kids, like logistics kind of things, because we don't talk about anything emotional at all.
Hmm.
Um, and if the focus is on distancing, tearing down, spacing, like, I don't understand how the only option there is that, we grow apart.
Hmm. Um, so that's a possibility. Separation can be one of the best things for a relationship, and it can definitely lead to a relationship ending. It goes either way, and so there's a risk to it, but there's a reward to it as well sometimes. Um, and it can be very uncomfortable, but also really good for the relationship as well. Um, so it's interesting. Her boundary of this, I think, is probably coming from a really healthy place of, let's just back out of this and let's focus on us. Um, but I like, if you think about what needs to be in place for the relationship to actually improve and heal and get better, do you know what needs to be there? What needs to be in place?
Trust,
Okay. Now,
safety,
okay. But Jesse, what creates trust and safety?
honesty.
Yeah. Um, and this is really tricky because um, in some ways it sounds like and tell me where you're at with this. It sounds like Jesse needs to be a good boy and like do what he's supposed to in order to rebuild the trust with your wife. And you can become Mr. Nice Guy, or someone who's trying to put on a certain facade in order to be accepted back, versus building trust again. Are you following me?
Yeah, and I've been actually trying to make a lot of focused effort on that, having listened to a lot of what you guys talk about, and discussing a lot of that with my CSAT currently, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to make sure that I'm making a focused effort of doing my work for me and not for an outcome. Just making myself healthy and doing things for my integrity, making sure that I'm keeping my integrity intact, regardless of what the outcome may look like.
Yeah, like really getting to a place of surrendering the marriage, and then you can't fully work your recovery when you have the agenda of saving the marriage as the primary as a primary motivator. Now, wanting to save the marriage is okay, Jesse, but do you hear me? Like, if that's the agenda, then your recover it undermines real recovery,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, like you want to get to a point where if she were to hand you the divorce papers today, that would be painful, that would hurt, but also your recovery will move on. Like you will move forward, regardless of the marriage. And that's one of
Yeah.
the beauties of this whole arrangement is it's not about this is not a relationship problem. I know that sounds crazy. This has caused all kinds of problems in the relationship, but this issue is not about the relationship. You understand that, right?
Right. Yeah.
This issue is about something totally different than the relationship, and the symptoms come out in the relationship, but the issue is something different. And so to remove the relationship from the equation, you can still stay focused on the relationship and have that get in the way of working real recovery. Even, ask yourself, Jesse, with sobriety, even, are you sober because you need her to know that you're sober? Or are you sober because that's who you are? Like that's you working that um, for you.
Yeah. I've done, I think initially, especially in like that year and a half when I was white knuckling, that's what it was. I was like doing it because I needed to be sober for her. I feel like now, because I had some other external situations outside of our relationship that showed me like this is wrecking my life. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I've really come to a place of peace where I'm good with either outcome. Yes, I would love to reconcile and I would love for us to stay together, but I know that we're going to be okay if divorce is what she needs and what is going to be best for her and for her healing. But I do honestly feel like I'm doing my recovery for me, because if we do divorce, I still have to have a handle on this thing. It's going to wreck my life.
Okay. Um. So the specific amount of time, a year or however long, um, let's just kind of put that to the side. Like, let's say she said 10 years or 3 years or 3 weeks. Like, let's put that to the side for a minute. She's saying I need some space. So you're working your ass off in recovery. So you're going to a lot of meetings, you're doing a lot of things. Um, do you feel like you're getting to the core of the issue?
Um, that's a good question. I think one of my CSATs is really big on the IFS stuff, and I think that has been helping quite a bit. And
Have you even with IFS, have you I don't want to say done work on your exile parts, but do you understand what exile parts are?
yeah, yeah, and I think that I think there's still work to be done to really kind of work through those parts. Um, because I feel like I'm doing a lot of like I've really come a long ways as far as self-compassion goes. That's been huge
Okay.
because I had like, in fact, when I started working with this newest CSAT, he had me do this big long assessment. I mean, it's an extensive assessment.
Yeah.
And when I did the self-compassion part, I thought, okay, like, I'm in a pretty good spot. So this will be because it was early on in the separation, but I had kind of come along a little to where I felt like I was feeling better. And when he told me my results, he said something about, he's like, I've given a lot of these assessments and your score on the self compassion part is in the top three. I'm like, oh, cool.
Hmm.
It means I did well. He's like, no, like top three means that like you're like one of the worst that I've seen as far as self compassion goes. I'm like, oh crap! Like I thought I was doing pretty well. Um, so so I've like really had a lot of really good self compassion work. I've been working through like Kristen Neff's workbook,
Okay,
and
good.
so I think there's still work to be done with some of those parts, but it's coming. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I Jesse, like that's awesome. Absolutely keep doing that. And I don't hear that you're getting at the core of it. So let me explain. Um, Practicing self-compassion is like it's still managing the issue. And I don't want to discount practicing self-compassion because it's like one of the greatest things that we can do. Um, but you're managing the issue still rather than healing the actual problem. Um, so you're saying you lack a lot of self-compassion according to the assessment. Think about you brought this up just a little bit. You're raised in a big family. What number were you?
So I had one sister, and there's five boys after that, and I was the third child, so I was the second boy.
You're the second boy, so you just kind of lost in the mix a little bit. Probably, I'm the second boy myself.
Classic
Um,
middle child syndrome.
yeah, um, and probably a pretty crazy, chaotic. A lot of energy going on in your family with all those boys, and probably a lot of fun, but at the same time, pretty crazy. Dad was off working a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and mom was sounds like the disciplinarian, rigid, tough love person. And to a little child, um, what does that teach you about love?
That it's rigid, also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think in some ways it was conditional for us.
Yeah, she had a structure, a system that you needed to fall into in order to be okay, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like certain rules, like this is how we live, this is what we do. You get punished if you don't. Um, you get rewarded if you do. Is that accurate?
yeah, yeah. My older sister bought socks for my brother and I that said "wooden spoon survivors," so that's accurate.
Okay, yeah. Um, and then also kind of overlapping that was some rigid religiosity, correct?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
So
Yeah,
there was the box and the system and the like this is how we live, this is what we do. Um,
yeah,
so it teaches you that performance or showing up a certain way is how you are okay. Like that's how you are okay. And if you don't, then you either need to hide it because you'll get in trouble, um, or like you're just gonna get punished, right? So
yeah.
so when I talk about exile parts, the exile parts are those parts that are so scared because because they know deep down that you are unlovable, that they have all these protective parts, like tons of different strategies of protective parts that are there to protect actually getting down to that exile part, that really deep part of you that is terrified that you're unlovable or not loved. And if we look at your trauma, Jesse, and we see these systems in place, you were taught at a very young age how to get, and I put in quotation marks, love, which in turn, what happened was you actually didn't experience. No, I'm not saying your mom didn't love you, but you didn't experience that unconditional love. Now, you fast forward to your marriage and it's like, well, I love my wife and we're best friends and it's wonderful. And you want her connection so desperately because you want a woman's compassion and connection. Also, your addiction. Like, you want women to be pleased. You want women to want you. You want women to desire to be around you. It makes sense why you're having affairs. Have you ever put these pieces together, Jesse?
Yeah, I've kind of wondered if maybe that was driving some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, level one is just like get sober, like stop the behavior that's causing consequences in your life. But that is so not recovery. But it's awesome. Level two is like start to connect with guys, build a recovery capital, a support system, live your life in a way where it can support you to stay sober long term. That's awesome. I'd say level three is starting to actually practice some self-compassion and accept yourself. But level four is going down into the depths of that pain, dealing with it, reprocessing that trauma. And what I mean by that is feeling all the emotions and the pain down there in that trauma that you need to feel so that you can come out on the other end and know that the messages that you got as a little child are actually not how love works and are not the truth. That you know that on a soul level, on a heart level. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Like a little too much. Yeah.
What are you thinking, Jesse?
No, that hits home 100% for sure.
And your wife might be very, very wise because she's the primary feminine figure in your life. And as long as she's there saying, oh, good boy, yes, you get worth. Or bad boy, you messed up. You hid something from me. Now you're bad. You're still in that same system. You're still sitting right there with the feminine bestowing your worth. And for her to say, I'm out, like, hey, you go wander in the wilderness, Jesse. Figure this out on your own. Man up. It leaves you with like, oh shit, like, where do I get my like acknowledgement that I'm doing this right? And so for her to say, go do that, that could be a really good thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've actually thanked her multiple times for the separation because I think, like I mentioned, I think that literally, like, I think she saved my life in some aspects.
Yeah.
And it's funny because her therapist, they've asked me to just, not communicate emotional things and not quote emotion dump. And so then I was kind of trying to find like, okay, well, who do I share these emotional things with? And at one point I thought, well, okay, my mom, like, and I love my mom. My mom is awesome and she's progressed so much and she has apologized multiple times for the rigid way that she raised us. And
hey, she did the best she could.
She did. Yeah, right? For sure. And so I sent her this big long text about this emotion, like this, situation that I was having a hard time with. And 2 hours later, I hadn't gotten a response and we had just barely been texting. And so I sent a follow-up text thinking maybe she got busy or something. And the follow-up text said, sorry, I know it's a lot, with like the little grimacing emoji. And then 2 days later, I still had not gotten a response. And finally get 2 days later, get a text back from her. And the text back says, hey, I'm missing my ice cream machine. Do you think you guys borrowed it? And I said, Mom, did you see my like big long text about the thing I'm dealing with? And her reply said, oh, yeah, well, I think you're just gonna have to be really humble through all this. And so that's why I was like, okay, like I need to learn to like process like it, and I kind of came to realize like I need to like for the first time ever in my life, I need to learn to like face my emotions myself and like process those myself. But also like I've also, I still do have other support. I can reach out to brothers in this support groups that I'm in. And so I have other people as well. But yeah, it kind of gave me like this is why I kind of struggle with this.
That is fascinating. Like her vulnerability, her tolerance to sit there in that space with you, just wasn't there. And for you, it's like, oh, another abandonment here, like another. It's not like your mom's trying to do that, but that's how it feels.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Jesse, you getting support from your mom or your wife, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's a good thing. My biggest support in my life is my wife. But it crosses over and it becomes problematic when it turns from support into consumption of them in order to feel like you're enough and that you're okay. Mm-hmm. And so you want to get to a point where you can reach out to support and connection to them, but also you can stand on your own 2 feet regardless. And you have other mechanisms like your brothers or, to process through stuff in life. And so for your wife right now, she's saying, get your support elsewhere. Like, I don't want to be a part of this whole system anymore. Mm-hmm. And, step 3, turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Will it be this way forever, Jesse? This separation limbo land forever?
No, it won't. It's going to fall one way or the other. So,
yeah. So you're vulnerable. You have to live in that faith, and that faith is the most therapeutic thing for you. And then you do your best. You step into your integrity and let the cards fall where they may. And they'll fall where they're supposed to, as long as you're staying in your truth, as long as you're staying steady. If you get to a point where your wife's still like, I need separation for another year, let's say, what would you do with that?
Hard to know right now. I've told her that, like, for me, she's worth 5 years, as long as like I see like progress. I don't want to just sit 5 years in like you said, limbo land with like no couples worth, like nothing happening. Just right. Sitting there stagnant. But yeah, I feel like I'm definitely willing to put in the time.
And this is where it comes down to you trusting yourself and you having a connection to a source of truth. So like if she comes to you and she says, hey, I need another year, you don't just automatically go along with, okay, whatever you want. I just want to make you happy, because right. Then you're in that same pattern, right, Jesse?
Right.
But hopefully you also wouldn't go with, you know what, that's not my truth. That's not what I'm doing. Sorry. Like, right. You would have to take a step back and say, okay, I care about her. I care about her safety. I care about her heart. This feels like not right to me. I don't know if I can do this forever. So what does work for me?
Right.
For me to stay true to me, to my truth here. And that's where you navigate that. And it might shift according to the circumstance, but she doesn't dictate that for you. That is found elsewhere. You following me?
Yeah.
But the only way you get to that level of strength and masculinity is by dealing with those wounds that say, I have to, this performance-based model with worth when it comes to pleasing a woman, right?
Right.
So you, Jesse, you came to the retreat. You've done some, I call it somatic or experiential, deep soul work. You've done some of that. You've done some parts work. Have you done any like ART, EMDR, anything like that?
A little bit with EMDR. ART, I'm not familiar with though.
How did the EMDR go? Did it move? Did it work, or was it hard?
Each time that I've done EMDR, I've ended up sobbing. So I guess that means it worked.
Good. Okay. And you haven't done it a ton?
Yeah, I think I've done like 4 or 5 rounds of it around different situations.
Have you done any around your relationship with mom?
No, specific to that, I haven't.
Yeah. I would suggest that.
Okay.
Find a therapist who will do EMDR with you and target memories around rigidity with your mom and reprocess that and desensitize that. And if you have to do it several times, do it several times, Jesse, so you can get to the point where you've let that go. And then all of the other stuff you're doing, Jesse, it's awesome as long as it's done from that place of self-determination on your own part and not out of compliance for your wife. So I love that you're going to all these meetings, that you're going to therapy. Like, you have structure around this, and you understand how serious this disease has gotten for you. It sounds like. And so I just want to applaud you for actually making it a priority and stepping into it. But I would push you even further to not just learn about your protective parts, but to deal with those exiles, and take one piece at a time. But in the end, you will resonate differently when you do that deeper work. And you don't do it for your wife, but she'll feel like, oh my gosh, I'm with a man who knows who he is. I'm with a man who trusts himself, who knows himself, who doesn't have to like practice self-compassion, but he actually just loves himself in all the best ways. That will change everything about the relationships that you create in your life. So, Jesse, any last questions for me?
No, I don't think so. I really appreciate your time this morning, man. It's been very insightful and helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, having the courage to come do this with me. So, you guys, if this was helpful, please give Jesse a shout out, leave a review and mention him. I know there's a lot of people out there in limbo land wondering where your relationship's going to end. And just to hear Jesse's story hopefully was helpful to you and him practicing the courage to come on today. So give him a shout out. And until next time, keep on keeping on. See you guys.